Paul here. All right. Hello. My name is Brock Weedman. I am a psychologist. I've been in private practice 19 or so years. Grew up here, went to California, did all my grad work in college down there. Came back up, and first person, my dad's a psychologist also, so I came back up to join him in practice. First person we met with when I was trying to build my practice was Ron Lawler, for those of you from in the day. Met with him, and then we moved pretty close here. Came in, started, and haven't left since. So I've been here a little while now. And then just have built up my practice, working with various churches, pastors, and other professionals in the area. So I've been here since. I deal with a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, a lot of anxiety, depression, things like that. And then in terms of maintaining our mental health, I was just kind of looking back through the last few weeks, and of the men that come in that I see, I was just kind of taking mental notes of what are the things I see that affect people and that we are impacted by, and that keep us, men, bigger population, all of us unhealthy, but specifically to men. What is it that keeps us unhealthy, and how do we maintain some of those things? And so this is kind of based on that, more through just my experience of the work I've done with people over the years, and what are the things that keep us healthier and able to maintain the ability to connect, stay healthy, things like that. So that's kind of where this is coming from. I don't have a big PowerPoint or anything like that. It was really just trying to keep it as practical in my mind as I could, of the things that I actually see and deal with on a daily basis. So let's pray real quick. Dear Lord, just bless this time. Help these words to resonate and to be helpful. Bless all these men here in their families, in their work life, in their personal lives, and in their spiritual lives, Lord. We just praise your name. Amen. So, a typical John or Bill, whoever comes in, which is kind of the culmination of a lot of things over the years, is a guy that comes in that is overwhelmed, burned out, stressed, having a hard time at work, struggling in his family, maybe feeling like he's lost in his competence or ability to function, struggling spiritually, things like that. What's going on? And there's a lot of things. Anxiety, depression, all these diagnosable types of things. And so I work with a lot of these Johns and Bills as they come in. And what's going on? One of my first classes that I ever had in college was a seasoned, wise, old professor that we all wanted to have. And one of the first things he said in the first classes as he came in, it's all about emotion. And we're like, wait a minute, we're talking about psychology here. This is one of our first psych classes. And he said, it's all about emotion. And that's true. Life is all about emotion. Men is generally, we don't think about ourselves as being that emotional all the time. We think of maybe more our wives who are emotion and tears and things like this. But let me tell you, life is ruled by emotion. And for men, that emotion tends to be, any ideas? Anger. That's exactly right. Anger is the thing that rules a lot of men's lives. Anger, frustration, brooding, being surly, being frustrated, those types of things. And this is a very common type of dynamic that men experience and struggle with. It's distracting. It is dysfunctional. It zaps us of health and happiness. And it tends to keep us pretty myopic in terms of what we focus on. And therefore, then it tends to be the frustrations of life and things like this. And really, life is ruled by emotion. Some of the areas where we really get affected by emotion is when we start talking about depression and anxiety. That's where it gets diagnosable. And as you'll see, as I kind of go down here quickly, you'll see I kind of address each of those specifically. But in terms of emotion, we talk about trauma. when we are truly, really deeply impacted by things. Trauma is literally all about emotion. Literally in the brain, it is a storage problem in the brain where the emotional and sensory areas of the brain is very highlighted and working overtime. And then the other sections of the brain, the left side of the brain, all the words and processing literally can go blank. And so emotion literally is the source of trauma. That in time when we are still affected by things, when we still feel like we are reliving something, when I'm diving behind a couch because I hear a loud noise because I was in war at some point, or I hear a siren and I'm bracing, that is literally emotion in the brain that is stuck, that we are reliving and re-feeling. And when we are ruled by that, we are now reactive to the world, and we are not responding well. And so when we live in that place of being reactive versus responsive, we are not going to manage the world as effectively as we can. So we want to learn to be able to respond to things, not react to things. And that can take a couple seconds of breathing. It can take just a little bit of awareness. But in terms of being able to build mental health and stay healthier, if we can take some time to be responsive, which is 2 or 3 seconds longer than reactive, it can change how we engage in relationships. It can change how we engage our spouses, our kids, things like that. And building that muscle of responding rather than reacting is a good way to stay out of a lot of heavy emotions and reactivity that can take us down a lot of rough paths. Let's see, when we speak to anger specifically in relationships, just the obvious overt type of anger can be really unhealthy for relationships. When we start talking about control, manipulation, abuse, yelling, screaming, demeaning, these types of things, which unfortunately is massively common in our culture and in churches. And oftentimes there's a lot of Christian men that use their faith and being the head of the household as a way to get what they want in their marriages. And in their families. It is super common. It's really frustrating, but it is just the facts. In every congregation, in every church across this country, there are men that use it to their advantage. And it is a shame, and there's a lot of women that are under the guise of these men that are controlling them. And it is not the way it is meant to be. A very quick, very not exact analogy of this is, how many just saw the Jesus Revolution? Anybody seen the movie? Okay. Fantastic movie, if anybody wants to see it, by the way. I didn't know this. A guy named Lonnie Frisbee kind of started the Calvary Chapel with Greg Laurie, those kinds of things. And there was quite a switch in the movie when Lonnie Frisbee was this amazing pastor bringing people in, the seekers, that it switched, and you can see it in the movie. They portrayed it pretty well, actually, where it switched from him preaching about Christ to suddenly I'm getting a lot of attention because I am now being able to heal people. And I am now kind of making this a little bit about me. And when that happens, you can see there's a different quality to what he's doing and why he's doing it. And he's making it about him. And now it's about manipulation and control because I want to be in the mix and I want to be the one up front. And you can see it in the movie, they portray it well. But this is what happens in families. This is what happens in churches. This is what happened with the Pharisees. This is what happens to well-intended men that start to get themselves in the way in families and marriages as they start to put themselves and their own desires before that. It's not healthy, and we need to try and be very aware of that. It is hard, as Ron was saying earlier, it's hard to be a strong man and not be abusive about it. And our culture doesn't like to see that either. And so men have gotten very soft. But there's a very fine line between being a strong leader in a loving way. And there's no coincidence that Christ did it well, as I think The Chosen is also, if you've been watching The Chosen, the portrayal of Christ in that is just a fantastic portrayal of someone who's strong and assertive, but does it in a very loving way, which is the way Christ should be, and I'm glad they portrayed it that way. All right. Pieces of how we stay mentally healthy. Building relationships. Relationships are the juice of life. We do not function well in isolation. We do not do well as islands. We can't accomplish a lot. Civilizations don't do well as islands. Any culture that has lasted for any more specific period of time than a few hundred years or lasted for centuries are communal cultures, generally speaking, at least from my understanding. The U.S., we are burning ourselves out here because we are so individualistic and so much about autonomy. We are burning our own culture out. And we are not going to last forever. You have to build relationships, not as a society only, but as individuals as well. When I work with young couples over the years, or couples, any couple for that matter, one of the things I've always told them in young married counseling, premarital counseling, when they're struggling after they've been married 30 years, oftentimes there is very little connection that these couples have with other couples. And there is something about iron sharpening iron, the wisdom of the Bible, what do you know? That when we are in community, in relationships, even as couples, it builds health in the marriage and it builds health individually. Isolation in general, when we speak to depression or anxiety or things like this, isolation is the one thing that breeds more and more mental unhealth. The more you isolate, the less connection and the less, I think, bouncing ideas off of back and forth with people. And we get into our own echo chamber, much like our culture is doing now with its own news. It gets fed the news within your own mindset, and there's an echo chamber that grows. We do so in our own brain, which tends to go negative and tends to go self-demeaning, or even tends to go hate towards other people. And when we get stuck in that without keeping ourselves connected, our mental health just continues to go down and down. So we need to continue to build relationships. Next thing we need to do, we need to acknowledge our blessings. And we are incredibly blessed in this culture. And you speak to many people that have been in other cultures from other societies, and they come here and they're like, we have so much stuff and we're so unhappy. And there's a lot of reasons for that culturally. But basically, we do not choose to focus on the things that we see as massive problems when it's the whole first world problems ideas, right? We get stuck on it, we spin in it, and we lose sight of the fact of truly difficult lives that some people in other areas of the world live. Now, that is not to say, and don't get me wrong, we are massively affected by the lives we live here, even when we live in privilege, okay? The things of our life impact us. Christ cares about the things of our lives that are impacting us. Again, it's all about emotion, okay? My son, he's at Point Loma. Loving school, loving everything about it. Great school, great community, great place to live, by the way, San Diego. It's phenomenal. He's playing soccer, but he's not playing. He's on the bench. He hasn't been in games yet. And so this is a massive first world problem that will only affect him for the next few years. But it devastates you. I've been there. I sat on the bench some in college, and it's brutal. It rules your life. It's a small thing. It has no bearing on the rest of his life. And even when you know that, and because you care about the students and you're doing other things and you're involved in other ministries, when these things are a part of your life, even if they're a small part, they're devastating. And it is so maddening, and it just debilitates you. And it debilitates the parents. Let me tell you, it's been tough. But it doesn't matter long term. And you have to keep this long-term focus. You have to keep your eyes on the fact that it's going to change. Life is going to be different. And there's going to be times when it's going to be tough. When we speak of suicidality, okay, when you look at 9/11, a lot of people jumped out of that building that day, okay? There was a real desperation that those individuals felt, right? We know a lot of people jumped. I don't know what it had to be like, knowing to being in the building, whether they were being burned, whether they knew it was collapsing, I don't know what. But they chose to jump. That was a true desperation, because not everybody that jumped was that depressed that day, guaranteed, okay? So there was a real desperation there. Okay. The circumstances of life create that for people who are suicidal in current life. Okay. So when you have someone who's depressed or anxious, and they are suicidal, when we are not in that state, can see you are not in a burning building. What are you doing? It seems very selfish that you're wanting to hurt yourself right now. But you have to understand the level of desperation that people feel is as if they're in that burning building because they can't see anything different. They think their life is collapsing upon them right now, and they don't know how to get out of it. And this seems like the most plausible way for them in that moment to literally be able to get out of that situation. So it's about perspective. So whatever these things are in life, and it doesn't matter in the moment what it is that's causing it, whether it's you're at war or you're in a building, or whether you're just frustrated with a certain small aspect of life. If it's influencing your life, mental health is affected. And we can try and take those steps. So the desperation that gets there when we are struggling in life is real. And it helps to have people around us, and it helps to have support, and it helps to have God, quite frankly, and to have a faith, which we'll get to. And purposefully, I left the spiritual health for the last, so we'll get there, but there's a reason I'll explain it. So back to acknowledging our blessings. Okay, the thing we're getting at when we're acknowledging our blessings is that we are getting out of the comparison game. Okay, comparison, usually we only compare up, first of all. We tend not to compare down. We like to look at those above us that have the stuff we want that we don't have. And what we forget is that when we are blessed, it's because we have everything we need. And Christ does that for us. And we all get caught up in it. And it's really hard to get our minds out of that. As this progresses, diagnosably, kind of what we are speaking to is the level of esteem that we have for ourselves. And am I worthy or not? If I don't have the things I want, am I worthy of it or not? Where people go in the negative side of this is that because I don't have the things I want and need, it must say something about me as a person. And when we internalize these things, that's where we get to the point that it's affecting us again in this big mental health way and personally. And so if we can get at this idea of staying, I'm grateful for what I have, the idea of gratitude, looking at what is it, the things I do have, contentment, godliness with contentment is great gain, right? 1 Timothy 6:6, I believe that's what it is. Yes, but godliness with contentment is great gain, right? If we focus on those things, it helps us build our esteem, and we get out of the comparison game. That is truly building some effective mental health and positive things to focus on. Next thing, it's not all about me. This is when I see John and Bill come into the office, and even myself, when I'm focused on things being all about me, our mental health goes down, right? We get more frustrated, we get more angry, we brood more and more and more. So it's not all about me. In the negative way, when we focus on ourselves, depression is about self-focus. It's not a selfishness like a childlike selfishness, but depression is essentially a very self-centered negativity about yourself or the world or my future. We get very distorted. We have a lot of unenforceable rules for other people about how I think they should live that we are then frustrated by. And we just brood in this negativity. We can wallow in it. This is where we kind of lead to the suicidal thoughts at some point because I just don't want to be here anymore. Creating more and more frustration constantly. Now, the other side of self-focus is narcissism, right? It's kind of actually been more of a buzzword the last 5-10 years in our culture. When I first started my practice, we knew what narcissism was in our practice. You didn't hear about narcissism much, honestly, in our society. The last 5-10 years, and maybe this is due to Trump, honestly, and not to make anything political, but Trump literally is the absolute textbook narcissistic individual, which I think we can all understand and see in how he is. When you make the entire world about you, even in that kind of a way, you are just pushing away the entire world, and you literally think you are better than everybody. That is very unhealthy, because the world is not all about you. So whether you are making the world about you in a negative way, where you can then criticize yourself and stay in this wallowing factor, or whether you think you are above the world, you are in a massively unhealthy mindset. And so if we can stay in this idea that the world is not just about me, it allows us to think beyond ourselves. This is where service can come into play. One of the things I always talk about with those individuals that are struggling and depressed, one thing I have them try and do is try and get involved in service, some kind of ministry. Not some nonprofit. Doesn't have to be any kind of spiritual, religious organization or anything. 'Cause I don't work with all Christian people. I work with a lot of non-Christians. So I couldn't tell them to go volunteer at their church. But getting involved in anything outside of yourself, it gets your mind out of your own perspective. Again, if we get out and we go serve somewhere else, we see someone else who's struggling, it simply takes the focus off of this and this navel gazing out to getting our head up and looking around. Oh, there's other people that are struggling. There's other things going on in the world. Oh my gosh, you can go watch the news and see there's other people struggling here. It just gets us out of our own self-focus. And that is a healthy thing to do to keep your maintain your some of your mental health. Let's see, for men, another common factor that I see, young fathers, old fathers who get very self-focused, let's be honest. A common thing is the frustration is brooding, back to that kind of thing here, okay? And oftentimes what this is about, and very specific examples here that some of you might resonate with, is a frustration of when I get home, I still don't get my own time. Or those that still take their own time and sit on the couch and do whatever while their wives are doing all the work with the kids and things like this. Massively unhealthy cycle when you get into that kind of phase of things, okay? And we've all been there to some degree, and some struggle more. But one thing I tell a lot of these young fathers, it's like, look, and I had a great example of this with my dad. When we were growing up, it didn't matter if we were up, my dad was up. We were wrestling every night. We were doing whatever it was every night until we went to bed. So he had a full-time job at home. He came home. He had a full-time job until the kids were asleep. And so if he was home, he was with us. And I think there's something about this that as men, this is very traditional, stereotypical, so try not to read into this too much. If we go and we're going to work and that's our full-time job, and then we think that then entitles us to then I'm off the clock. Okay? That's a very dysfunctional cycle for the home and for your spouse. You have a full-time job at work. And then you come home and you have a full-time job with your kids until they are asleep. And then you have a full-time job with your wife until you guys go to bed. And then if you want to stay up, maybe you get some of your own time, but then you got to go back to sleep. Wives know this, by the way, okay? For those of you who don't understand and know this, women understand this. When they have kids, they don't have any of their own time because they wouldn't be able to raise the kids. They understand this intuitively. It makes sense to them. They don't try to have some of their own time because they know they don't get any of it, so they never fight for it. Therefore, they don't think they're entitled to it, and they're not as frustrated about it. We as men, because we get some of our own time at work, we tend to then think we're entitled to it and that I think I should get it all the time. Okay? And it creates this mentality that I'm still entitled to stuff about me, and I'm not. And I struggle with this too. We all struggle with this. But there's a massive shift that when men shift and start to understand it's not about me. When I'm at home, when I'm at work, the lens changes to what I can get out of life to what am I going to do for others? I don't have anything about me anyway. And it changes the climate in the home immediately. And it changes the climate in you immediately. The book Sacred Marriage. We've all heard about. We went through it in the small groups here years ago. It's a super convicting book. It's a great marriage book, but it's super convicting. The subtitle is basically, what if all of this marriage stuff was to make us holy instead of make us happy? Okay? It's really about serving your spouse as if we're supposed to be serving Christ, which once again has nothing to do with me or what I want. And that's where again, I have less to worry about if it's never about me anyway, and I can just stay here in service. It's a very healthy way to live. It means a lot less frustration. It doesn't mean we don't get frustrated. It doesn't mean we still don't want things in life. But as the climate and the lens of our thinking, it truly creates a different way to engage the world and work and coming home for sure, in terms of what we're actually expecting, if it's about me or not. So that's one thing that I work a lot with young fathers on, is that shift. Because I've struggled with it too. And I can see the difference in my own self and in the climate in my home when I get more frustrated. And as Lamp can apply and test, years ago we were doing a cleanse. My buddy David Lamp here, you guys know him, the guy in the ugly red shirt. When we were doing a cleanse, I was so frustrated because I was hungry and this kind of thing. And I got so frustrated because some stupid airplane on one of the counters or the pillars on our house. I was so in my own head. I was so frustrated about that. He always laughed at me because of this. What a stupid thing to get frustrated about, right? But when I made the whole world about me because of all these other things that were going on, we can get frustrated over stupid things like that instead of, wait, there's a bigger picture here than just that. So it's not all about me. Very healthy thing to keep in mind. Thoughts, questions? Yeah, anyone agree? Okay. Philippians 2:3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. That it goes without saying. It's a good verse for that. All right. Next one. Focusing on what you can control. And this is kind of getting at the issue of anxiety. Any of these, by the way, we could spend hours talking about depression and anxiety. But anxiety is everywhere. Ron said earlier, 18% of America or something like that, which that's probably just the diagnosable side, which might be the numbers because it's actually much higher than that. But prior to COVID, 40 million Americans a year suffered from anxiety. Since COVID, about 100% of Americans per year are suffering from anxiety. COVID literally, even if you weren't devastated by COVID or wiped out financially, it literally changed how the entire world had to function in life. And anytime there's transition in life, it is a stressor for whoever that system is that's going through that. And so literally it was a stressor for the entire world. There was a very small subset of people that really enjoyed isolating themselves in their own home and working that really, truly loved COVID. But outside of that, it virtually changed the way the entire world had to function. And so for a couple of years, I was basically having the same conversation hour after hour after hour, 40 hours a week with clients that were coming in, of just normalizing, hey, this is tough. It's difficult. Even if we're not devastated by this, it takes a toll. So anxiety is about fear and catastrophizing. Anxiety, by definition, essentially just looks at whatever's happening in the world, even if you just won the lottery, and it's going to pick apart and look for the 12 horrible things that could happen because I just won the lottery. That is just what anxiety does. And the COVID brain was no better, for sure. Let's see, I'm not texting or anything here. But there was an NIH study that was done during COVID, and it looked at the teen brain. And so there's some things to take away from this. And it examined the teen brain over and brain maturation and development over 10 months during COVID. So after the pandemic shut down, teens reported more anxiety and depression, which we all knew, and the whole world did as well. They also internalized problems more than teens interviewed before the pandemic. So they were internalizing things more as they were going through the pandemic. Here's what it showed. The brain scans showed, and I'll pick this apart a little bit later, but the brain scans showed that parts of the brain involved in memory and emotion, which was the hippocampus and amygdala, those parts of the brain were thicker over that 10 years, over those 10 months. So the brain maturation developed in the areas of memory and emotion. So we were more emotional. Teens were developing more emotion during this time than typically they would have. The other part, the second part of this, was the cortex of the brain. And these areas are involved in executive functioning, such as self-control and problem solving. Those areas of the brain were thinner and did not develop as they should have over those 10 months. Now, these changes are normal in brain development, but they appear to have happened faster during those 10 months. So there was basically 3 years of maturation in those 10 months of COVID because it was such a stressor on the system and a stressor on the brain, which means we're remembering things and more emotional as teens, and we have less self-control and executive functioning as teens. What's that? It's a bad combination. And by the way, it just happens to mimic what teens and people experience when they're going through violence, neglect, and trauma. So COVID did a number on our brain. And not just for teens who are being studied, but for all of us. And it changed the way we had to live, and it caused a lot more anxiety and a lot more stress. So, what is anxiety? How do we manage anxiety? Okay, it is this catastrophizing of the world and everything in it. And it tends to be focused on things that is out of our control. So we have to look to focus on things that we are in control of and that we can manage, right? We have to accept what is about the world. When we talk about dysfunction in the world and hoping people will change and things will be different, we have to actually observe what is going on around us. We can't hope that something's going to be different than it is. If we live in the world such that I hope it's going to be sunny here in Seattle every single day, and I'm just going to wear a t-shirt and shorts every single day, and I hope it's going to be nice all the time, we're not really living in reality, okay? We're going to be frustrated with the world, and I'm going to be frustrated with the weather a good part of the time here. And I'm going to be cold, and I'm probably going to end up getting sick, and then I'm going to be really frustrated because then I'm not feeling well, and I'm still hoping it's going to be sunny, and I'm still going to get even more sick because I'm still not going to dress for the weather, okay? To be mentally healthy, we learn how to dress for the weather. We learn how to dress for what is. We can accept what the weather's going to be, and we can prepare for it. I can get ready. I can put on a sweatshirt. I can dress differently. Then I'm not so worried about the weather. It's just a part of life that I know how to manage. We learn to control anxiety and control our lives by dressing for the weather. Okay? That's a big part of being mentally healthy, is understanding what is happening around us, not hoping it's going to be different. We just engage what is, and we act as if. You have to be healthy in this way, okay? Let's see, hope. When we speak of dysfunction on extreme levels, whether it's maybe addictions or abuse. So in addiction language, if we live and we hope that this alcoholic is not going to drink tomorrow, and I'm going to plan my life as if they're not drinking because I just hope they're going to make it this day and not drink. That's not going to happen. You're not in control of that person. If you are a gal who's living with an abusive husband, who's controlling, manipulative, or physically abusive, or sexually abusive, and you're just hoping this time, because he said he's sorry, you're just hoping that this time he's actually going to mean it and he's actually going to change, that's not going to be very effective. You're not managing what you can control. Hope in the face of things when you don't have any control, when you are stuck on an island somewhere and you are hoping that someone will come along when you have no options, hope is a very good thing. Hope is amazing. Hoping in Christ for the things to come, that's amazing. Hope is an incredible thing. But when you are living in a situation where you have options and you aren't taking them, when you have the ability to move and do actions that can help you and you're not doing it, when you're hoping that you will get out of debt without changing the way you spend your money, hope is devastating. There's times hope is amazing, and there's times hope is devastating. Because if you believe that if I just pray about getting out of debt without changing the way we act, your hope is in vain, because you're now hoping in something that's ridiculous, because there's no amount of prayer, there's no amount of spirituality, there's no amount of hope that negates personal responsibility to go change your behavior and be effective. And if we spin in hope in inappropriate circumstances, we're going to get more and more frustrated with the world, we're going to be much less healthy, and we're not going to be doing the things we can to stay healthy. Okay, make sense? All right. Common things I talk about with Jim and John when they're coming in the office frustrated with life. Matthew 10:14. If anyone does not welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet and leave that house or town. When Christ was calling out his apostles and sending them out into the world, okay, he wasn't telling them to stick around and continue to try and convince someone who's not listening to you. Keep trying to convince him. Keep trying to convince him. That's not what he's calling them to do. Shake the dust off your feet. Move on to the next person that wants to hear the good news. You're not in control of them. You're in control of you're in control of what the message is that you have, how you live your life. Go do it and be effective with people that are maybe going to want to listen. Don't get stuck hoping these people are going to change when they're not, and you're foregoing the chance to reach other people, or you're foregoing your chance to progress yourself and be healthy when you're just hoping other people are going to change. Okay? Next thing there, when to walk away from toxicity. There's toxicity in life. There are many toxic people in life. So trust me, a lot of times we want to work through with people. We want to learn to love people. We have to accommodate people. We have to work through difficult things. A tough topic that I have with a lot of people, and this is where I get a little cynical on this because I'm dealing with a lot of very difficult circumstances. So my perspective and percentages on this that I'm telling people to walk away don't probably mimic the general population of struggles that people are having. But when you're talking about trauma, abuse, things like this, I have a lot of conversation with people about walking away. And not just divorcing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about immediately divorce. But even if you're in a situation where you need to step away and take a separation, that's an uncomfortable conversation. I have that conversation all the time. It's tough. But we need to walk away from toxic people. My new favorite book is called When to Walk Away by Gary Thomas, who wrote Sacred Marriage. Okay. After 20 years in ministry, he continually was frustrated. It's a fantastic book, by the way. Continually frustrated in ministry why he kept going back to those that did not want to hear the message, this whole thing that we're talking about, okay? There is a time to walk away. He discusses in the book over and over, the times when Christ let people walk away from him and the times when Christ stepped out of ministry and stepped away from the crowds because he was still human and he still had to go rejuvenate his own self. He was not there to reach everyone in their physical needs in that moment and heal them. That he had a bigger picture than that. He came to testify to the truth. Okay? It wasn't just to heal all the physical stuff that people have. And there are people that are going to take advantage of this, and there are people that are toxic, and we have to know when to walk away. It's not a popular topic, but there are times that we have to do that. Let me see here. Evil is devoid of conscience. It lacks moral boundaries. Right is whatever is desired. A seared conscience does not respond with mercy to a cry for help, nor is it stopped by the threat of shame. This is important. If you employ normal methods of resolving conflict with a toxic person, they won't work. Toxic people don't respond to empathy, and they're not afraid of shame. They have different motivations and different fears than average people. Toxic people immunize themselves against shame, malice, arrogance, and mockery. You can't shame someone who is convinced in their own mind that they are better than you. Your opinion means nothing to them. Okay? We want to be diligent. We want to be determined. We want to reach people for Christ. We want to care for people. We want to love people when they are struggling. But there is a point at which it is extremely unhealthy for ourselves if we chase after toxic people and don't let them go. We are setting ourselves up to be very unhealthy ourselves, and it just becomes a very rough cycle. That, again, on my side of things, when people are really in the hole, a lot of times, I'm talking to them about getting away from toxic people. It's the only way sometimes to be healthy and maintain your own sanity, quite frankly. Okay? If we have to deal with difficult people, there are hazmat situations where you have to deal with poisonous types of things. What do people do? They put on a hazmat suit. okay? So if you are in a relationship with someone who is toxic and you finally accept what is that they are toxic and you have to deal with them, suit up somehow, okay? Suit up, deal with them for a short amount of time, get away, wash yourself off, take the suit off, and then go be with people that are healthy, that are like-minded, where you can rejuvenate, as Christ did with his own disciples. He went out and he did his ministry. He came back to his disciples and he rejuvenated himself, people that were like-minded, that he knew he could recuperate. Or he went to prayer with Christ, to God, right? I mean, so if we have to deal with toxic people, suit up. We talk about that a lot with people, and it starts to make sense to them when they start to look at a lot of their relationship with family members. Oh, I have to engage this differently, except I'm never going to give them what I wanted. Again, that hope chasing after this person that will fulfill me and say they're really sorry for all the stuff they did to me in the past may not very likely happen. We got to suit up and deal with them somehow differently, and then get out and go get people around us that are loving us. Okay? Mental health, managing ourselves and healthcare. Sorry, we got to start buzzing through this at this point. Diet, exercise, and connection. The equipment of depression and anxiety and things that you can manage. Eat healthy, exercise, stay connected, find some enjoyment. What are the things activity-wise you like doing? Who do you like to be around? One other thing we learned during COVID, structure and schedule is huge. It was all a great idea to go home and work from home, and maybe we liked it for a little bit. But then quickly we found and we discovered we have no schedule, we have no structure to our day, and the whole world started to crumble. So what did people have to start doing? Even though they were home, they had to start giving themselves a schedule. They had to start building in a routine. Routines and schedules and things take a lot of the mental strain and the mental wear and tear out of doing the same thing over and over again. When we're learning to drive, when we are teaching our kids to learn to drive, scary thing to do, by the way, the ramp up and the learning curve of learning to drive, it's terrifying when you're starting, and they're terrible drivers. Terrible, as we all know, okay? The amount of mental strain it takes to think about this and this and this and look at this and look at this, it takes so much mental energy to learn to drive. As you get into it and we all become better drivers, the amount of mental energy it takes goes way down and the effectiveness goes way up. Okay? And so it takes much less mental energy to do much more when you're in a good understanding of it and you know what's going on. Structures and schedule and routines can do this to some degree. So when we are just trying to live nebulously, and I hope it works out, it creates a lot of mental strain and energy. So if we create intention and structure and schedules in this is why activity scheduling and things like this takes a lot of mental strain out of life. It's a lot healthier way to live. Exercise, obviously, the physical exertion, everyone knows exercise is healthy. Weight loss is a really simple formula. Eat healthy and exercise, and you lose weight. It's great. It's just really, really, really hard to do and be intentional about. But these are the things that actually do really influence mental health, which we could talk about for hours, but I'm sure we've all heard that type of stuff. Work-life balance, real quick. There's seasons of life. There's seasons of career. There's seasons of being at home. Another common thing I talk about with a lot of men in the professional setting, knowing when to push into your career and knowing when to step back and maybe let promotions go because you're in certain seasons of life with your family. I have that conversation a lot. Wow, okay, I could be pushing here, but man, it means I'm not at home at all. I need to step back from this. And that's a hard thing to do sometimes, and it might mean you're not on the same track. And quite frankly, if you're at that stage, you got to be willing to understand if he's willing to do the 90 hours of work and I need to be with my family, better for him, let him go. If we're just in the mindset of go, 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 go in our career, we're not going to be that healthy. So you got to keep that in mind. And it goes the other way too. Specifically, I remember when I was in grad school, I had people in our church at that time in San Jose asking why wasn't I getting involved in ministry and things like this. And I said, well, because I'm in my second dissertation and I have every class going and I'm in a full-on internship, I have zero margin for something like that. I have every intention to be more involved in ministry when I get there. But I am literally in a season right now. I got 6 months left. I cannot do anything else, and you got to stay focused. So there are times to recognize whatever stage of life you are in, but there are seasons where you might be able to get more involved, and there's seasons you need to pull back and just get something done. Being aware of that is very healthy, and you need to be accepting again of where you're at. Control what's in your control. Okay, so then spiritual life. Sorry. So the reason I leave this last, and this kind of speaks to a little bit what I talked about a little bit earlier. This wasn't to skip over the spiritual side of life, but Again, if we over-spiritualize everything and we negate our responsibility to do the work, because I just want to pray about it, again, no amount of debt will be overcome by prayer if you don't change the way you live and the way you spend your money. If we spiritualize everything, and this is what the church can do too. I've heard of too many people coming in who grew up in churches where they were made to feel bad about being anxious. They were made to feel bad about being depressed. You're just not praying enough. You're just not spiritual enough. I've heard of way too many people, wives that had come in who went to pastors, no offense against pastors, who went to pastors with their marriage counseling, and the essential message from the pastors was, well, the husband's the head of the household, so he should just pray more, and then you should be thankful that your husband is doing this while they're being abused at home by their spiritual leader as the husband. It's not, spirituality doesn't answer everything. We have to be effective. We have to think about how we're treating people. We impact the world around us. We leave a wake behind us. I talk about that a lot with people. We leave a wake behind us. If you're a boat on a lake, I don't care where you're going, you leave a wake behind you. Just be aware of your wake. It can impact other people. Simply sitting in a room with a red or orange shirt, I mean, you guys impact people. Right? We leave a wake behind us. Just be aware of it. It's very narcissistic to think that you don't leave a wake behind you. When you buzz through a no-wake zone and you destroy everybody on the shore, you're going to get the world very angry at you. And if you're in a good mood and you go back, hey guys, what's going on? And you just blew all them up, people are going to be angry at you. You leave a wake behind you. Be aware, right? Manage yourself, control what you can control, be aware of your wake, be intentional about your faith, and you're going to be healthier probably. So, sorry, ton of information. They could all go on and on and on. Real quick, one exercise a couple of weeks ago I did with a client. We were talking about some other really heavy stuff, and then it was kind of funny. She said, okay, so what are the ways I can be really unhealthy? And so we just started pinging back and forth. It was like 10 minutes. It was great. It actually became kind of fun. So I just put it down here at the bottom, kind of the same idea. So if you want to be unhealthy, isolate. Be silent and don't communicate. Be sedentary and don't ever move. Don't ever be active. Be lazy. Be reactive. Be angry all the time. Okay? Compare yourselves to everyone around you at all costs. Only up. Compare up. Tell yourself that life is hard only for you. That's a really good one. Everyone else's life is easy. Facebook life, right? Be perfect always. Yeah. And expect perfection out of everyone else and demand it. That's helpful too. Keep hoping that toxic people will change. Demand others agree with you and celebrate you. As our culture now, you must celebrate me. Yeah, that whole thing, it's working real well, isn't it? Which, by the way, is the exact opposite of true mental health. That whole idea that I must now be celebrated by the world, it is so unhealthy. We are healthy because we are satisfied in ourselves. I have my own self-esteem. I have my own relationship with Christ, that I don't need anybody else's approval for anything with. I know I'm authentic and I'm living the right way that I should. The idea of chasing after the world to celebrate me is the most mentally unhealthy thing our entire culture is doing, and I do not understand a piece of it. It is just utterly ridiculous for health to think that the world should celebrate me. It is so unbelievable. Try to change others all the time. That's another good one. Be really dismissive of others and what they're going through. People will love you for that. Focus on your frustrations, even those you can't control, and always try and answer the why to everything. If you want to spin in anxiety constantly, try and answer every why you come across. You'll keep spinning. You'll really enjoy it. So, thanks, guys.